Sure.
allows me to bring in people who are injured. So
But
they're
it-
not working on the,
But am I right in that analysis, though?
what's
You
that?
move to the joint dispatch,
Yep,
okay, frees up one of your firefighters. So the earlier discussion we had about needing 8 firefighters, well, now we've picked up 4 if we've gone the route of joint dispatch,
yep.
regardless of whether or not we do civilian dispatch. Okay? So you picked up 4 firefighters that you can use out on the street. So now we're down to just needing 4 additional to get to your 8. Am I right?
If you're looking at the joint with a sworn police officer replacing a sworn firefighter as a dispatcher, we would probably require additional staffing because there's absolutely no way.
No, but my analysis right now is just dealing with manpower, taking it step by step, dealing with manpower in the fire department, and connecting it back to reducing their overtime. If we joint dispatch, you pick up 4.
You shifted the
You
bill
pick up
onto
4.
him? Sure. No, that's what you're doing.
We'll just
Yes,
work through
you're
the
giving me
analysis.
4.
Work through the analysis.
Yep,
Joint dispatch
yep. Frees me up 1 man. I
gives
have
you,
4
gives you
guys.
4 men,
Yep,
1 per shift.
yep,
So the 8 that we were talking about earlier,
yep.
now we only need 4. Is that
It
correct?
becomes 4, right.
All right. That's what I wanted to make sure I understood and that was correct.
Yep. that's
Now, I
correct.
know there's other issues that go with it. Everything goes back to collective bargaining, as I'm finding out.
Absolutely.
No, but
It-
what you need to take into account is that there's additional resource required at the police department. At least that's what we're hearing over at the police department to deal
Right.
with the savings on the fire department side.
Understood, and I'd like to see what those numbers are, too, to see if it still would make sense to do that.
And the other side of the coin is that my dispatcher, if he's injured in the line of duty and so forth, comes back and takes that position, therefore I don't have to fill anybody on that injury. That's what I use some of my dispatch. I have a gentleman today, working today. He's injured, he's sitting on the desk, he runs the desk, we don't have to fill for him. If he was having to go out the door, we'd have to fill for him. My dispatch is a little bit different than the police department's dispatch and the way we do things. So, I mean, it's not gonna be just turn the switch on. We'd have to move all of my stuff over there, change radio systems.
I understand there's a whole process.
Oh, yeah.
Back to my initial question, though. How many calls does the fire department receive, on average, yearly basis? And do you gentlemen know what that is compared to what Reading receives? Because they're a much larger community than we are.
I don't know what Reading takes in. I know that we do 2,000 calls, emergency service, that we go out and deal with. We probably get 3 times that many in business-related calls for fire prevention, calls for alarms that we need to go out and work with, calls to my office, calls to the deputy's office, all the specialty parts that go along with the fire department, probably another 6,000 calls.
Thank you.
The interesting concept, and my last comment, even with the concept of joint dispatch located at the police department, the call taker, a 911 call comes in for an ambulance or for a house fire. The call taker still has to hit the transfer button to go back to the fire department. So that procedure absolutely will not change. So there has to be somebody available to be able to handle that transfer on the 911 call. Just so you get an understanding
getting more back-to-back and multiple calls at the same time. That's happening more and more.
Aren't there more and more communities moving to a joint or, and/or civilian dispatch?
Absolutely. It's a concept that's been in vogue for probably 20 years. Your bigger cities, Boston and Chicago, New York, you've been doing it for decades. However, it's a cost plus. It's not a cost savings. So just, we have to be aware of that before any decisions are made. And we have to do a lot of thinking and planning as to how that will be accomplished in this town. And just historically, the police department had received in the early 90s or mid-90s a substantial grant from the federal government for 10 full-time dispatchers, civilian dispatchers. Money was in hand, and the board back then decided to use three swings tax, if my memory serves me right, and money was turned back to the feds. It's something that we've been planning and dealing with for probably 15 years. And I don't think I'm against it, or can't speak for the fire chief, but the concept is a good concept. However, we just have to keep our eyes open as to the additional expenses.
Are we thinking of maximizing them and taking it to the next level, or are we dead here?
No, it's, I think that, you know, I would challenge the chiefs to the following. You know, I've heard a lot of reasons why, obstacles in the way of doing it, and I would challenge the chiefs to get together and look at it from the other side and see, in fact, you know, if the board decided to go forward with it and it was a mandate, right? You know, how could you do it at a minimum cost? You know, what would you do? Well, you know, thinking out of the box a little bit.
Moving it to the fire station.
Yeah.
Middlesex County did undertake an action a few years ago to become a regionalized dispatch center and abandoned it thereafter because of the things that happened there. I did talk to somebody about Middlesex.
Middlesex is
Yeah.
much more difficult place to deal with.
No, it's huge. Just, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
I think this is not necessarily a cost savings situation at all, and I don't believe it's ever going to be. You know, we're probably going to expend more money, you know, in order to come up with civilian dispatch and free up more people at both the fire department and the police department. But the fact remains, we've been hearing year in, year out, again from both chiefs, but in particular the police department, that the level of sophistication in investigations, the time that's being spent and that's needed to do it, is requiring more and more time of our people. And the demands are growing. I mean, policing is different today than it was 25 years ago. We heard it at our budget meeting last year, the chief and lieutenant at the time, you know, were very straightforward with it. I mean, the demands are high. So it appears as though, and again, you can look at our benchmark study and say we're spending more than our peers, but the fact still remains, you know, maybe we're a little bit more proactive than other communities in addressing these needs. But it would appear that this is going to cost us more money. But it may be a direction that we need to head in. And if that's the case, rather than hiring more police officers and more firefighters initially, we should be looking at civilian dispatchers, which from a cost standpoint is less. And then we'd have to hire fewer people, you know, sooner. So, and I guess to piggyback on what the chairman says, you know, to challenge the chiefs a little bit to come up with a game plan to meet the demands of the departments, various departments, and give us a staffing level. And again, like I said 8 people, and it's been 8 for 15 or 20 years. If that's the case, what's the most cost-efficient way of getting there for the fire department? What's the most cost-efficient way of getting where we need to be for the police department and putting together the game plan? Then we have something to look at as far as the level of services we need to provide, what we should be providing, and what's the most cost-effective way of doing it. We can limp along the way that we're going.
Well, you know, I think that the other thing we can't lose sight of is the reality of the situation that we're in. You know, economically, we're in going through a very tough period. It's apt to last for a couple of years. We've got a forecasted major budget deficit going into next year, right? And we need to find some clever ways of becoming more efficient or making changes such that we can maintain, a maximum amount of service, because we can't afford to do things the way we're currently doing them without cutting some level of service as we go into next year. And that's police, that's fire, that's public works, that's general government, that's schools, and everything that goes along with it. That's the reality of the situation that we face, and I think the idea box is open to everybody. I think some of the things the FAC has brought forth, ought to be getting us thinking. If it's not going to be cost effective to do this, what other things can we do? What are other people doing? The Essex is the Essex County trying to do I believe it's a fire regionalization that they've been talking about. At least that's what I don't know. You seem to be into it more than me. Yeah. There's an economy of scale. Maybe the problem is that we are too small, right, to make and achieve any savings on our own, because no matter what we do, we move it from one place to another, we still have to take the same number of calls. But as you get larger, what happens is, there isn't your person taking the calls on dispatch, and the police person on dispatch is not on dispatch 24/7. I mean, in terms of actually on the phone or taking a call. There's some time in between calls. Sometimes the calls are on top of one another. But in a larger environment, right, all of a sudden you can take advantage of that economy of scale and say, well, I need fewer people because, the average calls, fall into some pattern, and I've got enough people to cover it. In a smaller group like we are, it's probably more difficult to do. So my thinking, at least, is that if we're going to make any inroads in savings, we're going to have to look toward some form of regional dispatch. And I believe there's some funding available in the form of grants and to deal with some of the capital equipment required to implement such a system, right? But I agree with you that moving someone from one place to another doesn't necessarily make a savings. Although Steve makes a point that if you're going to bring on additional staff going forward to deal with an issue, a growing issue, it might be better to say, okay, this is our long-range goal. In 10 years, we're going to be 100% civilian dispatch, and move in that direction.
And again, in the short run, we may want to, just as long as we go in eyes wide open, go and hire 3 or 4, firefighters, knowing full well that at the end, when it comes pension time, it's going to cost us more. But from the immediate standpoint, we can use the overtime funds in order to fund these positions, minimize the callback, and enhance our services. And then you can look at whether it be the LS to supplement, the income stream.
Well, it seemed to me,
But-
in looking at the numbers and giving, obviously give everyone an opportunity to go back and vet the numbers, if we took a single firefighter as somebody that could be used to move from one shift to another and get around the union issue of it has to be on one shift, that one individual could save us some money, because that's money that's not on emergency calls. It's money to cover somebody that's on vacation, that's out on injury, and if the chief had the flexibility of adjusting that individual's schedule to accommodate the particular situation in a given week or a given month, right, then that could be almost 100% savings in overtime. Which means that at overtime